Our speaker today is Dr. Nira Chamberlain. Nira is an incredibly versatile mathematician who uses mathematics to advise and inform large-scale industrial projects. And I'm not going to list all his achievements here, but can I give you just a taster? So Nira has degrees from Coventry Polytechnic and Loughborough Universities and a doctorate from Portsmouth. His modelling was crucial to the final decisions to build the HMS Queen Elizabeth, which was a multi-billion-pound project, and he's one of only 5 mathematicians named in the 2014 Science Council list of the leading UK scientists. He's currently president of the Institute of Maths and its Applications, and I know him well as a member of the IMA Council. Nira also finds time to be an inspirational public speaker, and he speaks in schools and in the media. His presidential address for the IMA is next Tuesday, so if you enjoy today's lecture, you might look out for the IMA lecture on Tuesday. That's the ima.org.uk. So today he will talk to us about the black heroes of mathematics.
First things first, thank you very much indeed, the ICMS, for inviting me to do this talk. Now, before we start this talk officially, I'll just have to say a few things. When I'm talking about black people, I mean those of African or African descent, African diaspora, like African Caribbeans, African Americans. So I'm just defining those people who are descended from those who were born south of the Sahara Desert. And also, I do recognize that in terms of black people, we're not the largest minority, but I know that there are other larger underrepresented groups in mathematics. But for the meantime, what I'm going to do is just focus on the black heroes of mathematics. So when the music starts, they'll start my presentation. So hopefully you will enjoy this talk. And go forward.
You ready? Let's go. Yeah. For those of you that want to know what we're all about, it's like this, y'all. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name. He doesn't need his name up in lights, he just wants to be heard, whether it's the beat of the mic, he feels.
Okay, so this talk actually starts with an event that occurred in May 2019. In May 2019, I found a new, exciting mathematical website, and it said, mathematics is indisputably the greatest subject in the world. Everything in our world follows mathematical law. Mathematics teaches engineers, engineering teaches science to scientists. It is a fantastic, wonderful subject. And I thought, brilliant. And this website went on to say, who are the mathematicians behind mathematics, this great and fantastic subject? Well, it said you had people like Euler, Turing, Germain, Gauss, Lovelace, Nash, Ramanujan, Erdos, Mazarine, Leibniz, Fermat. But stop. Where are the black mathematicians? Say again, where are the black mathematicians? I sent this group a message just saying, wait a minute, isn't our whole group missing? Where are the black mathematicians? See, I'm not the only person that has asked this question. This question has been asked before. So the New York Times published this article last year, and they said, what I learned while reporting on the dearth of black mathematicians. See, the key question is, are black mathematicians, are we hidden or don't we exist? We do not exist. Now, amazingly, if we actually go, we see that mathematics actually has a checkered history. Now, if we go back to 1969, there was a very influential mathematical society called the American Mathematical Society. And back in 1969, it actually rejected a resolution to address the shortage of black and Hispanic mathematicians in its rank. Now, because that decision was made, from this influential mathematical society, the American Mathematical Society, we get to the consequences of today, where out of 46 million African Americans in the USA, there only are approximately 300 who have a PhD in mathematics. This is according to Dr. Eric Walker, who wrote the book, Black Mathematicians and the Pursuit of Excellence. Again, going about the checkered history of mathematics with the Black community, one thing that most people didn't realize is that actually that mathematics was used to justify slavery. This gentleman that you see here, his name is Jefferson. Now, when he was Secretary of State, to soon to become the third president of the United States, when somebody actually questioned him saying, should slavery continue, he answered by using this quote: comparing them by the faculties of memory, reason, and imagination, it appears to me that in memory, the Negro, that's Black people, are equal to whites, but in reason, much inferior. And I think one can scarcely be found capable of tracing and comprehending the investigations of Euclid, and that imaginations there are dull, tasteless, and anomalous. Yeah. See, that was back in slavery time. But coming up to much more recent in date, I'm talking about this article appeared in The Guardian about 7 years ago, and it was written by a very popular mathematical journalist. And what he was saying is he stated a fact about the Field Medal. Now, the Field Medal is the highest award that you can win in mathematics. And what he said was, there has never been a Black winner of the Field Medal, never been a Black mathematician that's won the Field Medal. That is true. And because of this, he'd come to this conclusion that this implies that Black people were incapable of genius. So going back to this New York Times, it's actually doing a survey of researchers. What they say is that they don't believe that there are many Black researchers, mathematicians, because they feel that, have the opinion that African Americans are not as intelligent as other races. So this shows both an external factor where there is actually low expectation of what Black people can achieve, but also within the Black community itself, there's something called stereotypical threat. See, a stereotypical threat is saying, let's say I become a mathematician, and if I actually go and do mathematics and fail at mathematics, do I actually confirm one of the pillars of racism against Black people? One of the 5 pillars of racism. And this is the statement saying the belief that Black people are intellectually inferior. My name is Nira Chamberlain, and this is my story. Now, this picture on the left is me when I was around about 7, 8, and this is me in modern times. Now, when I was about 7, 8, most of my friends were into, let's say, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. But for me, I like to pick up a calculator, press some buttons, and wait until the numbers flash at me. Because I was sometimes I was like imagining that I was some sort of super mathematician. But one thing that I realized was that when I was growing up, in, let's say, junior school, going on to secondary school, there were no Black heroes of mathematics. Most of the Black heroes that I know about were those who were actually our sports stars or musicians, yeah? And one day, when I was about 14, 15, I went to see my career teacher, and we also see a career teacher to talk about our future career. And the career teacher asked me and says, Nira, what would you like to be when you grow up? And I said, oh, well, I wouldn't mind doing something that involves mathematics and logic, because I'm really into, let's say, these mathematics. I'm sure that there must be a career out there where you can do mathematics. And he looked at me and he says, Nira, somebody of your physique, you should become a boxer. And I said, a boxer? I said, yes, you should become a boxer. Now, what I did is I went home, and I was pretty discouraged by what this teacher had actually said to me. And I went home and I spoke to my parents. Now, my parents, they came over to the United Kingdom in the 1960s. They were part of the Windrush generation. And I said to my parents, said, look, Mom, Dad, the teacher at school says that for a career, I should become a boxer. And this is what my parents said to me. They says, you don't need anybody's permission to be a great mathematician. I say again, You don't need anybody's permission to be a great mathematician. But this was my reply to them. I said, okay, well, it's like this, Mum, Dad. Mum, you work as a nurse in the NHS, and Dad, you work in a car factory, but this is a teacher, you know, a teacher must know what they're going, and if the teacher says, I can't be a mathematician, and surely, you know, their opinion is going to be higher than yours. And because I was probably at that age when you only half believed my parents, but my parents persuaded for me to carry on pursuing being a mathematician. So I decided, yes, do my GCSE, A-levels, degree, masters, but really and truly, I would describe myself as what's known as a fan of mathematics. So I'm just using an analogy of football. You know, you have people who are really like football, but would go to a football stadium and watch football players playing football. They wouldn't actually go onto the pitch themselves and become the football stars. So with me, even though I really like mathematics, I never imagined myself being a professional mathematician. So I would go to conferences and read about mathematicians and see what they're doing. And I was thinking, oh, it really would really be nice to do that. Now, there was one conference that I went to just to have a look at all of these mathematicians, and it was called ICAM, the Industrial Congress of Industrial and Applied Mathematics. And this took place in Edinburgh in 1999. And I went there and I was seeing all of these mathematicians doing all their applied mathematical stuff. And one day I was surrounded by this group of people, and I said, "Hello, and who are you?" And they said, "We are the Congress of African American Research Mathematicians." And one of them came up to me and said this, he goes, "Nira, there are historical reasons why there are not many black people who do a PhD in mathematics." And he said this to me, he says, "Nira, somebody of your enthusiasm and your passion, you should do a PhD in mathematics." I thought, really? And I said, yes. And I felt really encouraged and inspired. So what I did is I went back to Birmingham and I applied to one of the university's programs in PhDs and thinking, yes, I'm going to do it. And wrote up my applications, got my references, got an interview the following week, went in and sat down with this professor of mathematics. And this is what he said to me. He goes, "Nira, if you ever think you could do a PhD, you are naive because you are technically weak." And this is him saying, just taking one look at me. And so, really discouraged, I thought, wait a minute, here we go. We have this university mathematical professor telling me that I can't do a PhD. So I went home and my mom and dad said this to me. They says, "Nira, do you remember what we said? You don't need anybody's permission to be a great mathematician." And I said, "Mom, Dad, out of respect, you work in a hospital, you work in a car factory, I have a teacher that says I can't be a mathematician, I have a university professor that says I can't be a mathematician, so that's it, I'm done. I'm not going to pursue becoming a professional mathematician. I'm not going to pursue doing a PhD in mathematics because clearly I can't do it because these people say I can't do it. Professor, teacher, that's it. I'm done." So over the next couple of years, my mathematical activity went down to the bare minimum. And I didn't really pursue my dream of doing a PhD, and I didn't pursue a career in mathematics. Now, a number of years later, this is my son, Philip Chamberlain, when he was aged 4. And he went to his infant junior school, and the teacher said this to Philip, said, "Philip, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And Philip says, "Oh, I want to be a mathematician." And then the teacher said this to him, "Philip, you will never be a mathematician, but when you grow up, you might become a singer." So end of the day, when Philip came home and he told me that story, I was really angry. I wanted to go to that school and give that teacher a piece of my mind. How can you be telling that to a 4-year-old boy, telling him what he can and can't be? How can you tell him that he cannot be a mathematician? And then I thought, but wait a minute, the same thing that happened to Philip happened to me. But what did I do? I gave up. I gave up my dream to become a mathematician. So I'm thinking, this is my fault, because how can I be a role model to my son, 4-year-old, when he actually sees me giving up on my dream? How can I say to him, no, go for your dreams, irrespective of what people say to you. So you don't need anybody's permission to be a great mathematician. And yes, my mom's from a hospital, and yes, my dad works in the car factory, but I thought, guess what? They are absolutely right. So I decided then actually to pursue my dreams and become, one, a professional mathematician. So I became a mathematical modeling consultant, and what I was doing as a mathematical modeling consultant was I would go around Europe solving real world problems, and I was getting the reputation of somebody that would solve mathematical problems that the engineers and the scientists would find very challenging to do. I was the go-to person to solve these problems, and I was working on problems like on Formula One, on oil rigs, on helicopters, on airplanes, on cars, all around Europe. I worked in France, worked in the Netherlands, worked in Israel, worked in Germany. But there was one project where I was approached by a Royal Navy captain, and he goes to me, he goes, "Hello, Nira," and I said, "Hello," and he goes, "We have a problem with a future ship," and I said, "Yeah," and one, it is it's very expensive to build, but it's unaffordable to run. You know, it's very unaffordable to run. Do you think you can come up with a mathematical way of making this ship affordable? And I said, "Okay, let me think about it." Then I said to this to him, I said, "Have you ever heard the story Goldilocks and the Three Bears?" And he says, "You what?" I said, "Goldilocks and the Three Bears." See, there's part of the story that goes like this. See, Goldilocks, she goes into the house and she sees the porridge and she eats this porridge, and this porridge she says, "Well, this one's too hot." She eats the next porridge and says, "This one's too cold," and she eats the next one and says, "This one's just right." I was thinking, there you go. That's how you solve your problem. And he got up and he walked away, and I didn't see him again for another 2 weeks. Then he came back to me and says, "Nira, would you like to follow me?" So I followed him, and I walked into a meeting, and the meeting room looked like this. And I said, "Hello," and they said, "Hello," and says, "Well," they said this to me, said, "Well, this meeting is about, we're discussing about cancelling this project to do with this future ship. And we've heard that you've come up with a possible solution." And I said, "Oh, yeah, yes, I have." And I said, "Would you like to tell us about it?" And I said, "Okay, have you ever heard the story Goldilocks and the Three Bears?" And I says, "You what?" I said, "Goldilocks and the Three Bears." You see, Goldilocks, she goes into this house and she eats one porridge and she says, "This porridge is too hot." She goes on to the next porridge, she says, she eats that and she says, "That's too cold." And if she eats this one and she says, "This one's just right." That's how you solve your problem. And this is what they said to me. "Do you realize that this project is of national importance and you're coming up with some sort of nursery rhyme?" I said, "Okay, wait, it's like this. Okay, let me be a bit more specific for you." See, what you need to do with that ship is that you need to link its capability to its design and to its cost, and that will create a whole series of nonlinear equations. Now, what you then do is that you write an algorithm which you then put into a computer program, and then you say to that computer program, "Design me a future ship that's not too hot, not too cold, just right," and then you will have a ship that has a capability that is affordable. And they said, and then I showed them an example, and they said, "Oh, actually, we think that might work." Now, that was over 10 years ago. See, the question is, would you like to see what that ship looks like today?
I must admit, I held my breath as she kicked me here through the harbour entrance because it's so small.
We're a proud Navy family coming here to see the ship going in. My husband had worked on the programme, so it's been kind of a lot of our lives. In fact, our wedding cake was the Queen Elizabeth carrier.
It was brilliant, worth waiting for. It's a brilliant experience.
It'll take some time to build up the operating envelope and our understanding of the complexity of operating a ship of this scale. But we've done a lot in preparation for that, working with both the French and the United States Navy.
HMS Queen Elizabeth, the largest aircraft carrier that the Royal Navy has ever had. Now, somewhere on that ship, there is a placard, and it says Dr. Nira Chamberlain, and there's also placards of all the contributors to the aircraft carrier. Now, that placard will remain there for the next 50 years. Now, in America, there's a book called the Encyclopedia of Mathematics and Society. Now, in it, one of the chapters, it actually does talk about the aircraft carrier, and then mentions the mathematical model I did to create in doing that. So I thought, okay, that was all good. But so that was number one. I decided to be a professional mathematician. But two, I decided actually to start a PhD. So what I did is I actually found an academic at Portsmouth University who looked at the merits of my ideas rather than my race. Yeah. And what I did is I started a part-time PhD with him, because I was doing also a part-time PhD, as well as working full-time as a mathematical modeling consultant. And after a number of years, I completed my PhD and so this is me with my PhD, and that's my wife, Jacqueline. This is Philip, a little bit older, and this is my other son, Nathan. So got that PhD, all being good, and a couple of days later, after completing my PhD, I was named by the Science Council as being one of the UK's leading scientists. Yeah. Now, later on in that year, it's about 6 months later, there was this. I received a letter from a book called The Who's Who. Now, The Who's Who has been around since 1849. Now, if you reach, let's say, the top of your profession, or you're somebody of influence, you get into the Who's Who. And the Who's Who comes out every year. So once you get in the Who's Who, you stay in the Who's Who each year until you pass away, and then you move into another book called Who Was Who. Now, in 2015, there were around about 30,000 entries in the Who's Who, of which there are only approximately 30 mathematicians. Now, just giving you some ideas of who were the mathematicians. So, for instance, you have people like Marcus de Sotoy, professor of mathematics at Oxford University. You have Timothy Gower, one of the British mathematicians that won a Field Medal, professor of mathematics at Cambridge University. And then you have, let's say, Andrew Wiles, I believe he's at Princeton University, famous for solving the Fermat's last theorem. And then you have other people's like, let's say Roger Penrose, Ian Stewart, John Conway, you got John McWhirter, Silas Hoyes, Peter Grudon, Michael Attia, to name a few, Eric Zeeman. But 2015 was actually a special year, because in 2015, I actually became the first Black mathematician to get into the Who's Who. So I thought, okay, so this is really, really good. So I became a professional mathematician. I got my PhD. I was named as one of the top 100 scientists. I got into the Who's Who. I'm thinking, good, my mission is over. I'm done. I can now go on and live my rest of my life. Not a problem. Right? Wrong. I received a message from this person. It was a personal challenge, and it was from Professor McGeffy Faken, who is the first Black female mathematician in South Africa to get a PhD in mathematics education. And she said this to me: being the first is not something to be proud of, but it's a calling to ensure that one is not the last. I say that again. Being the first is not something to be proud of, but it is a calling to ensure that one is not the last. Because really and truly, in terms of the Who's Who, I may be the first Black mathematician in the Who's Who, but I am also the last. So what am I going to do to ensure that I'm not the last? So I was thinking about it, and around about the time, there was this rumor about this film called Hidden Figures. So Hidden Figures was about 3 African-American females who actually work for NASA. So what I'm going to do is going to just play you a short video which is going to give you a summary about Hidden Figures.
It was the early 60s and America was on the brink. The Cold War was being fought in the sky while the civil rights movement was playing out in the streets. Catherine Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson were at the center of it all. 3 African-American women working as mathematicians at NASA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. They were actually called human computers by NASA officials, and their skills changed the space program forever. Johnson did the math that put John Glenn into orbit and helped make this possible.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Vaughan became NASA's first black supervisor, and Jackson became the agency's first black female aerospace engineer. Yet despite their impact, for decades, their stories were untold and their place in history ignored. But thanks to Taraji P. Henson, Octavia Spencer, and Janelle Monáe, they are no longer hidden figures.
So, one of the main parts about Hidden Figures was the lead mathematician, and her name was Katherine Johnson. Now, Katherine Johnson was really truly was a mathematician at NASA, and she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama back in 2015. And so, and that's that picture here. And over here, you can see in a number of years ago, is that she's receiving a standing ovation at the Oscars. And these are the 4 ladies that actually played the 3 of the ladies actually played the mathematicians at for Hidden Figures. So now, but one of the things that was interesting was these 3 ladies, these mathematicians who worked for NASA, Dorothy Vaughan, Katherine Johnson, Mary Jackson, they worked for NASA in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Now, in one of those decades, I was actually this age. I was actually the age when, and later on, I was at that age where the career teacher told me that I could not be a mathematician. He told me that I should be a boxer. Now, maybe he didn't realize that at the time, and certainly I didn't realize at the time, that that there were black mathematicians working for NASA. If I knew that there were black mathematicians working for NASA, I would not have been so discouraged by what what the career teacher actually had said to me. And so, and another interesting thing is the film Mathematical Consultant. His name was Dr. Rudy Horn, and if you can remember when I went to Edinburgh for that big mathematical conference, and I was surrounded by the Congress of African American Research Mathematicians, and one of them actually came to me and said, Nira, somebody of your passion and enthusiasm should do a PhD in mathematics. Well, the person that actually said that to me was actually Rudy Horn, the mathematical consultant of Hidden Figures. So with that, I was thinking, okay, well, so Hidden Figures has identified, let's say, three mathematicians that worked for NASA. And I was wondering, I wonder if there's actually other black mathematicians out there who are actually hidden. So what I decided to do was I decided to target and go to loads of Black History Month events. Now, Black History in the UK is celebrated in October. So I went to places like the Black Culture Archives, the International Slavery Museum, others, and I was just specifically looking to see whether I could find black mathematicians. But every time I went to an event and looking for black mathematicians, this is what I keep on finding. I kept on finding Beyonce and Beyonce and Beyonce and Beyonce. One sings, guess what? I'm sick and tired of seeing Beyonce and Beyonce and Beyonce and Beyonce. I want to ask the question, where are the black engineers? Where are the black scientists? So I said to the Black Cultural Archives, where are the black engineers? Where are the black scientists? But specifically, where are the black mathematicians? And this is what they said to me. They said, well, we haven't got the expertise or the know-how to find out about black mathematicians. Now, you're a mathematician, you help us. You do the research and you help us. So again, that was another personal challenge. So I thought, okay. So I did my research, and what I did after some time, I created a social media poster campaign called the Black Heroes of Mathematics. I put it on Twitter, and the response to it from the Black community and also from the general mathematics community was very positive. It got retweeted by the American Mathematical Society, it was retweeted by mathematical societies in South America and over in Asia. I was getting all of these emails and saying, listen, you're identifying these, we don't even know about these mathematicians, you know, tell us more stories about these Black heroes of mathematics. And so what I decided to do was, not only did I create this social media campaign, I created into Let's Say Talk, which is you've seen in one version here, but also decided to create a video. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to the Black heroes of mathematics.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, 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 oh, glory, glory. Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against, yes, glory is destined. Everyday women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, the spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots we on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, 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 oh. Now the war is not over, victory isn't won, but we'll fight on to the finish, and then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory, oh, we'll cry glory, oh glory. Now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They march with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, heroes, to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, his power was the people. Enemy is lethal, a king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald ego. The biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing, our music is the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream we had an epiphany. Now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win a war individually. It take the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh,
Okay, so in that video, one of the things I said in one of those parts of the videos, it says one of the best right now. Now, one of the best right now is Katie Abiola Akikululu. Now, reason why we identify as one of the best, because of all the black mathematicians out there, she's probably the one that was the closest to winning the field medals. Why I say that is that she was the first black mathematician back in 1997 to win the most prestigious award called the Sloan Research Fellowship. Now, those who win those American mathematicians that tend to win the Sloan Research Fellowship tend to go on to win the field medals. 2 years after Kate won the Sloan Research Fellowship, Terence Teho, who's regarded as one of the best mathematicians in the world, he won the Sloan Research Fellowship in 1999, and then a number of years later, he went on and actually won the field medal. So out of all the black mathematicians out there, we regard her as one of the best of all time, and was certainly the closest to winning the field medal. And in 2001, she became the first African American female to publish in a respected mathematical journal, the Annals of Mathematics. And also, we're going to say is about one of the greatest of all times is this gentleman here, whose name is David Blackwell. And what we're going to do is it's going to show you a short video, explain to you about David Blackwell.
What were the odds this Illinois child would become one of the world's great mathematicians? David Blackwell was game to try.
I was always pretty good at mathematics. I don't know that I had favorite subjects. I studied whatever you were told to study. Did it as well as I could, but I looked forward to recess. I was a good student.
At age 22, he had earned a PhD from the University of Illinois.
There's a lot of luck in things. The man that I chose as my thesis advisor was far and away the best possible choice I could have made. His field, probability theory, turned out to have a lot of appeal for me. It turned out that I liked to think that way.
Blackwell wanted to teach mathematics, and he wanted to serve at historically black colleges and universities.
I got a list of all the black colleges from some almanac. And there were 105 of them. I wrote 105 letters. I actually accepted the first offer that I received as soon as I got it. And my really serious mathematical work started at Howard. At Howard, the intellectual atmosphere was just different.
Suppose that every day a machine produces a number, either 0 or 1.
In the mid-50s, Blackwell joined and soon after headed the University of California, Berkeley's newly created Statistics Department. Over the years, Blackwell continued to expand mathematics by introducing game theory, decision theory, and information theory into the field.
Let's suppose in particular that we knew that all these xn's were greater than or equal to a half.
David Blackwell, the first African-American elected to the National Academy of Sciences, dedicated to assisting disadvantaged students in the U.S. and Africa.
First, the advice I would give to young people generally is try everything and keep looking until you find something that you like.
Right. So that was David Blackwell, and what we're now going to talk about is the new black heroes of mathematics, those people who are causing waves this time around. And so what we have here is Abizisa Abegula, who is one of the leading pure mathematicians over in America. And you have this lady here, Talita Washington, who is very high up in the American Mathematical Society and is an expert in the history of black mathematicians. You have this gentleman here. His name is Justice Aheto, who's a mathematician from West Africa. He's good at creating, let's say, mathematical models that look at child malnutrition and advises the government, and currently is leading the fight against COVID in West Africa. And then you have this lady here who's Chakita Jackson, who does mathematical models of cancer, looking at ways to research cancer to stop tumor growth. But this person here is quite interesting. His name is John Urschel. John Urschel used to be an NFL player, an American football player, and he's now going on doing a PhD in mathematics. And what he says is, he says something quite interesting in the AMS book called The Living Proof. He says, sometimes I find myself with young African Americans, would-be mathematicians, hear them ask how I managed to get to where I am. I'm watching them hold back tears when I talk about being behind or feeling like they cannot succeed because they do not have the background. He goes on to say, I have a responsibility to set a good example for young people everywhere who have a mathematics talent but may feel like they cannot succeed because they do not look like those who have succeeded before. I have a responsibility to succeed, not just for myself, but for my mother, my grandparents, and every minority who feels like the field is close to them. Yeah. So, in saying that, I've done let's say a similar thing for the past 5 years. I have been working for a charity organisation called Target Oxbridge. Now, what Target Oxbridge does is they want to increase. So they work in partnership with Oxford University and Cambridge University to try and increase the number of black students attending Oxford. And what they do is they target A-level students and they give them master classes. And let's say 5 years ago, they actually approached me to give those who wish to go to those two places, to universities, to do a mathematics degree. And so what I've been doing over the last 5 years, I've been doing mathematical masterclasses to the top young black mathematicians in the country. And so far, our proportion of those who actually made it into Oxford and Cambridge is a very high percentage. Out of these 11 here, 9 of them actually made it into Oxford or Cambridge. And it's something that I enjoy, and they keep on inviting me back to do some more. And I will be doing another masterclass coming in August. So, in conclusion, I have to say, Hidden Figures tells the story of African-American mathematicians working for NASA. Furthermore, there are many more hidden figures who shows that mathematics is for everybody. But before I end, I'd like to do an epilogue. What you have is you have 2 cartoons there, one on the left and one on the right. The one on the left is from a Canadian newspaper, which was reporting on a school that was trying to increase the number of black mathematicians. And what they did in this cartoon, they're mocking the fact that why would black people want to pursue a career in mathematics? The mathematics is wrong, and the caricature of a black mathematical teacher is very negative. And look at the person on the right. This is Marjorie Lee Brown. She's one of the first African Americans to get a PhD in mathematics. So what we want to do is that we want to move from a society that from the left to a much more positive to the one on the right. Now, in this talk, I mentioned a number of things, and there are a few loose ties that I haven't tied up. So this is where I'll stop speaking, and what I'm going to do is play my final video, which ties up those loose ends.
Dream we had an epiphany. Now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win a war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord. My eyes have seen the glory. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day.
thank you for listening.
Well, thanks, Nira. One of the things that really doesn't work in Zoom yet, and which we haven't worked out how to do properly, is how to thank the speaker at the end, because there should be a whole wave of applause coming across, and you can see it now in the chat. Lots and lots of thanks and all that sort of thing. But I'm going to do the clapping.
All right, thank you
for everyone, and the dog now gets excited too. That was wonderful. It was just a mixture of incredibly sobering and inspirational, and that mixture is sort of quite hard to work out where to move onto or from. So thank you. It's just really thought-provoking. What I found really interesting looking at the chat was the extent to which people weren't necessarily asking questions, but were making comments. There's a lot of sort of reflection that you've created rather than obvious questions. But there are a couple of questions that I'm going to begin with, and then we'll sort of see what we get to in other forms. So the first question I wanted to ask, which is from Amy, was who inspired you?
Who inspired me?
Yeah, so where does your inspiration come
from? Well, okay, so well, with me, I at first it was like watching all these detective programs, you know. I was using logic, like I love Columbo, you know, so you know, and I could see that, you know, maybe that link between the logic and mathematics, and I wanted to do something. And there was an old program, like a lawyer called Tony Petricelli, and I was always using logic in there, and mathematics was my strongest subject, so I thought combining logic and mathematics, I wanted to do something involving mathematics. But and moving on, when I was in, let's say, researching historical mathematicians, I mean, yeah, people that inspired me was Andrew Wiles, you know, stopping in his room for 7 years, you know, and also the maverick mathematicians that he talked about. There's the Japanese ones that came up, that pointed the way to how he could actually solve it. Also, you know, Katherine Johnson, you know, she was an inspiration. So, yeah, those are people that inspired me.
Lovely.